out the screen, and it's because this Coke bottle ends up in this indigenous group of people living in Australia. They don't know what to do with it. But after a while, everybody wants it and everybody's got a use for it and they quibble over it. They come to the conclusion the gods must be crazy and that they take it and want to throw it off the end of the earth. Well, I think technology is like that. As Emerson says, things are in the saddle and riding mankind. But tonight is a case in point, and I'm glad you're all here. This talk was designed around the concept that we're looking for a larger screen to express some ideas that I had in my book, and which I'm going to share with you right now in case you haven't got a copy yet. Obviously you should. But the Heart of Astrology, chapter 3 of the book is called Tuning into the Cosmos. This book is available from me, from Amazon, from the publisher Regulus. And trust me, 20 years of my life went into it, and it's definitely worth the time to pick up and read. So, that having been said, where are we now? I'm going to talk to you about the things that I'm just fiddling around trying to get the right angle on this here. So you'll have to excuse me. I don't really know my way around this right now, but we'll get there. Okay. So I started my book in the preface with a quotation out of my master's book, the Discourses, and I'm going to read it. It'll just take a minute of your time, but it is worth because it sets the tone for what we're about to discuss. Consciously or unconsciously, every living creature seeks one thing. In the lower forms of life and less advanced human beings, the quest is unconscious. In advanced human beings, it is conscious. The object of the quest is called many names: happiness, peace, freedom, truth, love, perfection, self-realization, God realization, union with God. Essentially, it is a search for all of these, but in a special way. Everyone has moments of happiness, glimpses of truth, fleeting experiences of union with God. What they want is to make them permanent. What they want is to establish abiding reality in the midst of constant change. That's from Mayor Baba's Discourses, page 266. So what does tuning into the cosmos have to do with fulfilling the greater scheme of what life is about? Well, we as astrologers, or people who have come into the astrology fold, are familiar with the quotation from Hermes Trismegistus, which is as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. This is a statement of the continuity between the cosmos and the individual, between the macrocosm and the microcosm. So they reflect each other. So what does this mean for us? Well, the basic assumption here is that what goes on in our inner world is reflected in our experience of the outer world. And what I wanted to talk to you about tonight, although this is described in some detail in my book, there were a bunch of things that just never were going to fit in. It would have been, the book would have ended up being about 9,000 pages. So this is a little bit of a view into what some of this is about. Well, what does the cosmos mean? The cosmos means everything that we don't experience as ourselves. So there's a duality. There's you and everything that isn't you. The cosmos is, simply speaking, a manifestation of your own unconscious. You are conscious of yourself and you're unconscious of everything else that manifests as external objects in your universe. So what does it mean to be in tune with the universe? When we think of being in tune, we think of like you have a tuning fork and you get it vibrating at a certain frequency, and all the other things in the world, like pick up on that frequency. And in a sense, everything in the universe is a series of tuning forks. And where our attention goes, that's where our vibration moves to. And what we want to do ultimately is to have our vibration manifesting something that's important to us, that's worthy of our time. And it isn't so easy in today's frame to have the focus where your mind comes to rest on one thing long enough to have any real result from it. Most people's minds, myself included, tend to want to wander from thing to thing. It's a wonderful thing when you can get it to stand still and to just focus on one thing. When people take up a meditation, that is the goal, is just to still the mind. Well, what's the virtue in that? It's to be able to see clearly the things inside of you that you aren't conscious of, to have those things be able to come to light. And in one vast sense, the spiritual path is a journey from the unconscious to the conscious, to be able to embrace everything within our awareness of what it means to be in the world as a sentient being. So why is it important to be in tune with the cosmos? Well, when we're not in tune with the cosmos, life is a struggle. You find everything opposes you. When you are in harmony, the universe is easy. Now, if I'm a famous doctor and I knew I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was 3 years old, I would not go to an astrologer and say, what line of work should I want to be in? What would make sense to me? Why? Because we've always known. Now, by the same token, if you're in complete harmony with the universe, you don't worry about how do I get in tune with it. You're part of it, you feel it, you're at one with it. But when things go wrong in our life, we get shaken up, we get this sense that, well, something's not working here. And the process of getting back into tune with the universe, getting into harmony with it, we unleash a tremendous amount of potential. We release that inner quality in us that wants to find our own unique place in the world, our own unique rhythm, and we come to the cosmos being willing to manifest our gifts. We can, as astrologers, when we meet something that's unpleasant in life, we can go and find what it is that's hanging us up. We can look and see, well, what are we out of step with? What in our chart shows that we're not in harmony? And in the process of doing that, we come to a position of seeing that there are things in our life that aren't working. And astrology gives us a roadmap of finding not just what we need to do to get back on the path, but how to make that work for us so that it's self-perpetuating, that our energy just moves forward and that we're back in harmony with the universe. Um, Tuning into the universe means moving toward a sense of completion, a sense of wholeness. And the easiest way to do this is just to start becoming friends with the planets. And the whole second section of my book is on learning to confer with the planets, having a dialogue with them. And why is that important? Well, when we start talking to the planets, we are talking to part of ourself that's maybe been out of reach for some time. And it would be good if we're able to get that part of ourself operating correctly. Now, one of the people who's been studying with me asked recently, well, how do we start a dialogue with the planets? I want to see if I can find this diagram and share it with you, because it's a simple way of seeing what this process is about. Now, the planet is at the apex of this triangle, and we have the subject and the object. So fire manifests as a physical substance in the world. You see fire. But we experience anger in us, which is also a manifestation of Mars. Both of these things are manifestations of something that comes from a planet. And Mars as a planet isn't just a construction of our mind, a convenient place to put ideas. It's a being. Each one of the planets is a deity, and they manifest something in us that's very important in our life. And learning to work with these different components of ourself becomes incredibly important to not just being happy in life in a general sense, but also progressing toward our true destiny. So understanding this triangle becomes really important. And, I remember years ago, must have been it was in November of 1995, I was doing the astrology for what was called the Hunakani initiation in the Big Island in Hawaii. There was 11 days of like a vision quest, people doing all of this deep inner work. And it was coming to a conclusion, and people were asking, well, I guess we can't take anything physically from here. And Sandra Michaels, the person who was leading the quest, said, of course you can. This is, well, there's warehouses full of things that people took from here, and then their lives got terrible and they brought them back and everything got right. And Sandra says, oh, you can take anything you want, but you have to ask permission first. And it was such a concept. Oh, talking to Pele, the goddess of the volcano, and getting permission to take something from the island. It's sort of like the idea of, well, how do you befriend things that may seem very foreign to you? It was back in the 70s that Rob Hand, famous astrologer, if you don't know him, was leading a workshop on working with the planets out of the Western magical tradition. And he got everybody doing this ritual to invoke the planet Mercury. And the wind kicked up and it was, like people were hiding. It was so intense. And they didn't know how to shut it down. And the thought occurred to me, this is like Fantasia, where the sorcerer's apprentice gets the broom bringing all these buckets of water and doesn't know how to shut it down. And the whole purpose of this story is we end up with in that relationship with our planets at times where we want to activate them. We want to get, our Mars going because we want a stronger immune system, or we want to have the physical vitality to accomplish a task. But we don't really start dialoguing with that part of our nature. We don't start coming to terms with what does that really mean. Now, when I look out at you, I can see Julia, but I can't see myself. Am I in this mix in anywhere here?
Yep, you're on big screen.
What it's on
You're
the big?
you are.
I am.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm just wondering. I'm in a sense, I'm more at home at the time of Krishna or Ram than I am in the modern Western technological society. I'll get it because this isn't my last incarnation. I'll be around for a while. It's important to come on board this. Anyway, but my point is that when we start talking to the planets, when we start dialoguing with them, we start getting a closer relationship with the external world and our internal world and where they meet. And they meet through the planets because the planets create. That's what they do. Houses, signs, planets, aspects, the four building blocks of astrology. Well, planets are the active ingredient. They are the deities that create. And so learning how to come to terms with Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, how to come to terms with all of the planets and how to have them function in a meaningful and realistic way in our life is the quest. Now, as we learn to come to terms with the planets, it's helpful to understand what signs of the zodiac they rule. And I'm going to see if I can find this. If I'm clever, I can find this diagram here now. And I will do a screen share and get it in front of us here and everybody can see it. Okay, here we go. This is
Yep, we see it.
Yeah, this is the zodiac. This diagram was done for me by Paula Bellamini for my book, but it's a simplification of a diagram that's in the front of a book called The Zodiac, A Life Epitome by Walter Sampson, which is, simply speaking, the best book on the zodiac that I have ever seen. And many of the famous astrologers that we know and love, Rudyard, like Marcia Moore, Mark Douglas, many of these books drank liberally from Walter Sampson's book. But the point is that the signs of the zodiac can be split into three groups: elemental, individual, and universal. The elemental signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, fire, earth, air, and water. They're the four building blocks of all creation. And then the individual signs, Leo, Virgo, Libra and Scorpio describe the birth of the ego and the death of the ego. Everything that we experience in the human form, contact with the world, relationships, all of that is through the individual signs. And then the universal signs, Jupiter, Saturn, and are the structure, the Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now, what is interesting about this is that the mutable signs are ruled by Mercury and Jupiter, and mutability has to do with the changing of the seasons. And it is how we make changes. And Mercury is the part of our mental life that explores and experiments. In the elemental kingdom, is just things, gathering things. Jim and I just scatter stuff. In the human kingdom, in our individual kingdom, Mercury in Virgo organizes, makes lists, catalogs things. But what's opposite Gemini and Virgo is Sagittarius and Pisces, which is Jupiter. And Jupiter, king of the gods, organizes all of the other planets and gives them a sense of position, station, decorum. Jupiter, as a god, creates the zodiac. And why the zodiac is important, the 12 signs of the zodiac that we experience in the Earth's annual revolution around the sun, it lays out a spiritual path. I talked about this in other lectures, that how the 12 signs of the zodiac actually are a manifestation of a process that the Buddha laid out at the time of his enlightenment, called the dependent origination, the 12 nidanas, which, again, is another talk, but, it starts with Aries, which is, ignorance. And, then there's karma formation, there's consciousness, name and form, the arising of the ego through the five senses, then contact with the external world, then our preferences, then our desires, then clinging, which is Sagittarius, and then becoming, which is Capricorn, which is then birth, which takes place in Aquarius, and then in Jupiter in Pisces is suffering, death, and the end of the cycle, which either leads to enlightenment or a return to the ignorance. And it goes, and the circle goes around, and when it is entirely grasped and understood, the soul becomes enlightened. Anyway, this is the grounding of why the signs of the zodiac are so important. But in the process of tuning in to the cosmos, it is important to recognize that all of the signs and their rulers and the elemental side of life are things that we have to master. The Buddha had said, what keeps us bound to the wheel of life is ignorance, which is Aries, and desire, which is Scorpio. And that is, for us, means managing our Mars. So Mars creates karma. And if karma is not created, then we don't have to repeat anything. We're done. And there is something that is important that we get to a little later when we're working, spiritually in a conscious fashion, is called non-binding karma, where it's a high art that's given to the aspirant by the master, where you live out your repeating cycles, but you don't have to keep repeating them. They're reach an end point and they're done. So we get to a place where we want to overcome the wheel of life. We want to be done. And that's a good thought. It's like, oh, I'm tired. Life is gloomy. But when we get to looking and saying, how do we know when we're not in tune with the cosmos? Well, number one, if you're depressed, that's a sign that you're not in tune. If you are bound up with things that are frustrating and seem like they keep repeating themselves, we are out of touch with we have lost our grasp of the cosmos. When you are blaming others or blaming things, that's a sign that you're out of step with the cosmos. When you can't accept responsibility for what's going on in your life, when life seems intimidating, you get a pessimistic view of, oh, this is all too hard. And trust me, I've been around the block a dozen times with this, and there are moments when I realize, wow, I really lost contact with that connection with the greater cosmos. I was in uh, a confined space and was beat up by somebody else. When I was meditating, and a friend of mine came in and says, wow, you must have really terrible karma for this to have happened to you. And of course, I felt the anger stirring up inside of me, but I looked at him and says, well, of course, you're right. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that this is my karma. I wrote a chart interpretation program back in 1987, 1988 called Indra, which, you enter the data and it calculates your chart and interprets it. It's analytic. It's not there's not any synthesis to it. But for as me as an astrologer at the time, I wanted to have something I could just give to my clients. Here's all the basic information on your chart that isn't dumb. I mean, there was at the time a lot of dumb programs, but there wasn't any really intelligent ones. And so I wrote one, and I wrote the computer code, and I wrote all of the text, and I couldn't get it to work. There was something that was glitchy with it. And so I called David Cochran up, who was the person who had written the computer language that my program was written in. It was a program called Wizard. And I said, David, I need to just come and live at your house until you can work out the kinks in this with me. And he says, okay. So I went to the airport. It was the day before Thanksgiving. And I had a ticket and I was getting on the plane was canceled, and I'm calling, this was before cell phones, and I'm calling him from the airport. And I said, David, I can't get this to work. The gods are conspiring against us. And David said something to me I'll never forget. He said, no, the gods are conspiring with us. It's our job to figure out what this is. And you go and back and have Thanksgiving with your family, and I'll have it with mine, and we'll get this taken care of on a few days later on the other side of this, which was absolutely the right thing. But, me with Mars rising in my first house, I don't take postponement when I'm hot on the tail of something too easily. So, there's just so much here that I would like to share with you. And I wanted to give you something else that had a big impact on me. and sort of designing how to go about explaining how you get out of step with the cosmos and how to get back in step with it and why it's worth your time to do it. You know, there is a wonderful book. It's a masterpiece, actually, called The Passion of the Western Mind by uh, Richard Tarnas. And you know, it's something that when I read it, it was written in 1991. And when I read it, I thought, if I had read this when I was a freshman in college, it would have made college so much easier. I was a philosophy major, and to my way of thinking, it is the best um, secondary source in philosophy, bar none. Now, he and the epilogue to the book, let me see if I can get the reference here. Where was this? Richard, don't abandon me on this. It was on page 415 to 445. It was the epilogue to the book, and he uh, had taken something out of Gregory Bateson's book on ecology of the mind and showed how the schizophrenia develops in a child with a schizophrenic mother in their relationship, and then relates it to our relationship to the cosmos. And then he spends many pages trying to unwind it for us. And I thought it was worth our time to spend a few moments on it. Basically, it's a simple proposition. You know, when a child develops schizophrenia and the mother is the instigator of it, the mother is giving conflicting messages to the child. She may be saying, you know how much I love you, but her body language is rigid, and the child gets it from her that she doesn't really love him at all. And that presents the child with a conflict, but the relationship is vital, and the child cannot escape the closure of the system. And it presents them with a dilemma that, in using, simple terms, it drives the child crazy. They lose their moorings. And many things happen that lead to the mental unbalance. Now, what Richard Harness says is that, we live in a world today where we've gone through the Copernican revolution, where when we end up not with the world not being a friendly place anymore. Well, what happened? We went from being the center of the universe, where the Earth was the center of the solar system and everything revolved around the Earth, and meaning everything revolved around us, to being on an insignificant planet in this vast space where we were an afterthought. The second part of this formula was we went through this Cartesian awakening, where we are conscious, but the universe is unconscious. The universe is unfeeling, unpurposeful, and we are alone in it. And then the final cap, the final icing on the cake, was the Kantian revolution, where the world is actually unknowable. We can't get direct access to the essence of the universe, which mirrors the same relationship that a schizophrenic child has to the mother. The difference is that the child can't escape the relationship with the mother, but we can, as sentient beings, get a different relationship to the cosmos. The missing ingredient in all of the Western intellectual history is love. You can't understand the cosmos through the mind. You got to have that immediate empathetic bond with it where you feel it. And in the Western mind, we have this great empathetic bond with the sense of objectivity, but none of the compassion flows immediately out of that. So we get stymied in our growth, our relationship to Mother Nature. And learning to bond with the cosmos means being able to reconnect, to trust that life is brilliant. It's a wonderful place, that we do have a place here, that we're supposed to be here, and that God is loving and that the world is loving and that the universe is loving. So reconnecting when we are out of touch with that part of ourself that knows this is we have to do things that put us back in context with nature. And yes, of course, you can go to the analytic side of diagnosing what's out of step, what are you having difficulty with in your own chart? Okay, that's legitimate, but you can also just go out into nature, to be in the woods, to be amongst the trees, to take off your shoes and walk on the grass. I mean, if you want to be scientific about it, that actually in 10 minutes time will recalibrate the rhythm in your body to the rhythm of the earth. And there are many different things that we can do that help us attune to the cosmos. And this becomes extremely important in terms of our own growth. Simple things. Tonight, having difficulty with the technology, getting things to work. Okay, well, what rules the technology? What rules the breakdown? Well, Uranus. Well, where is Uranus? Uranus, I mean, you can look it up later, but Uranus, is in Taurus. Well, Taurus is the sign of Uranus's fall. Uranus is exalted in Scorpio. And every time that Uranus is in a Taurus, there's great difficulties on Mother Earth because there's chaos. Things get kicked up. The last time that Uranus was there, we had the Dust Bowl. We were destroying the planet, and as we are, of course, today. And we learn to identify these things and start to see, well, how can we make these things less potent in our life, less problematic? And yes, Uranus rules infinite intelligence. And even though I'm talking Neptune, I'm talking about the compassionate side of God, Uranus has a role to play because Uranus as infinite intelligence allows us to see what everything in nature and everything in life is good for. There's a saying in the Upanishads that I am very fond of, and I used it in my book. When I was a young man, I wished to move the mountains, so I practiced yoga. But by the time I had gained the power to move the mountains, I had become God and realized why I put the mountains there in the first place. And we all end up out of our limitations, wanting to make the world over into the things that we would like it to be, which isn't so much a bad thing, it's just out of proportion. There's a video that I put the link to every so often in my newsletter, about every 5, 10 years. It's um, it's a link called The Story of Stuff. And it's about how we end up producing all of the products that we have in our society. And why it's important is that you get a clean vision of what the difference is between an industrial mind and the ecological mind. The industrial mind solves problems linearly without regard for what the natural order of things is about. And the reason that it is important sometimes for us to go out and to experience Mother Nature without the input of human beings is because the mental impressions that human beings bring, when we are inventing, uh, plastic and the internal combustion engine and street signs and all of the things that go along with civilization, is the mindset was linear. It was to solve a problem in isolation. You need electricity, you build a hydroelectric dam, you chop down the trees, you flood the plains. It's like, well, without some global planning, it ends up being chaos. And you sacrifice the long-term viability of the human race for a short-term goal. Any of you remember when Ronald Reagan was president? I mean, some of you were my age, and when Ronald Reagan was president, he had a man who was the Secretary of the Interior. His name was James Watt, and he believed, because he was a fundamentalist Christian, he believed that it didn't matter if we chopped down all the redwoods because his grandchildren wouldn't see him anyway, because we were living in the end of days. The world was getting ready for Judgment Day, and it was all going to disappear anyway. It doesn't mean he was evil or bad. He's just stupid. Had this very limiting theology that made certain things that he advocated doing wrong. And I mean that sincerely. It's like there isn't anybody that is, what would you say, intrinsically evil. Everybody has a role to play. But some people, you feel that the role that they play in our life is just to be able to push back on them. And 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 we grow through that process. Now, how do we get to being in tune with the universe when we're out of step? Well, I've said, like having direct contact with nature, but and I've said this in my book on chapter 3, tuning into the cosmos. Yes, you can be in downtown Manhattan in a high rise and tune into the cosmos. It's just, it is easier when you are in a natural surrounding to feel that connection. And if you don't feel that connection, it is easy to become very bothered by the hostility that you get confronted with in the external world. Um, you know, Technology is great. But what happened when we split the atom? We had the atomic bomb. It took a long time before the use of that technology started in a direction that could be of real help in the world. And it's true with all kinds of inventions. It's in ancient Greek had steam engines, but they didn't use it to produce anything in their economy. The steam engines were used as like little toys that they made for children. Why? Because the slave technology took care of everything for them that they could see. And yet, at the same time, with Eli Whitney inventing the cotton gin, in the time leading up to the Civil War, suddenly the cotton gin made slavery very beneficial. And it became economically viable. Again, the technology is not good or bad. It's how it is placed. It's how it fits in to the greater scheme of things. Now, does anybody know what country in Europe produces the most bananas? Anybody? Anybody know that? Iceland. Iceland produces more bananas than any European country. Now, how do they do that? They didn't do it because they live on a tropical climate. They did it because they built greenhouses that have thermal heat from the earth. They harness a technology that allowed them to produce more bananas than any other country. Now, up until the 60s, they were commercially produced, but now it's cheaper to import them than it is to grow them there. And it's only at the University of Iceland that they maintain, like 600, 700 plants that they have as kind of a curiosity and part of their scientific research. But I mention this in the sense that we live in an age where, anything is possible. We could solve any problem if we just had the will and the heart to do it. But instead, we end up in this kind of tug of war, trying to make things work that that are out of step with the culture itself. When I was talking about the Cartesian, Descartesian, and Kantian dilemma that's been placed on us, and where we feel alienated from society. Do you know that Kant's major work, the Critique of Pure Reason, came out in 1781? Well, that was right when Uranus was being discovered. Technology had this focus of distancing us from the cosmos when it first emerged. It didn't, like we think about, liberty, freedom, democracy, all of the things that Uranus also does represent. But Uranus also is this is psychologically crippling force until it is correctly harnessed and integrated. This is kind of I'm just going to drop this on you, but when I was a young astrologer, which actually what was a century ago, I studied all of the charts of famous astrologers going back a long time, going forward. There was always a relationship between Saturn, Uranus, the midheaven, and the sun. And there's a reason. The sun, of course, the ego, the center of self, and the midheaven, career. But Saturn is the sign of limitation. And Uranus is a sign of infinity, limitlessness. And the Greek mythology of Saturn castrating Uranus and throwing his genitals into the ocean and Venus rising up from the ocean. The myth is basically, in order for creation to happen, infinity had to be limited. And Saturn is that limitation. And so, as astrologers, we are always in between. We're having the bridge between the limitation and the infinite intelligence that's there for us to tap into. So we have the relationship to the environment that we want to overcome and make work for us. But it also happens through our relationships with people. And, you know, it is kind of a, a damning thing that our relationship to each other becomes so incredibly limiting. You know, when on my first trip to India, which was totally coming home back in 1976, something magic happened. Which being home is always like that. But I would be in places that were like, you would think of it like being lost in Harlem in the 60s, you know, as a white person, you'd feel so out of place. But I never felt that. You know, we would be, you know, in very strange places amongst people, but always there was a kindness and a sensitivity to people. We all have everything that we need, but we just don't know how to advocate for its correct use. I'm going to give you a quote out of Meher Baba's discourses that I thought was very telling for how to carry out our pattern of relationships with each other. True happiness begins when one learns the art of right adjustment to other persons. And right adjustment involves self-forgetfulness and love. Hence arises the spiritual importance of transforming a life of the limited self into a life of love. And basically, without love, life would be meaningless. And we all know it, but we seldom practice it in an explicit way. But it really does boil down to that. Now, astrology is, and let me say, I've been with what I think of as some of the greatest astrologers in the world, and I've had them give me advice and look at, you know, the astrology and this and that and stuff. And I've never known, and again, I've seen astrologers do stuff that I could never do or I haven't ever done in this lifetime. But at the same time, looking at it, I realized that we're just scratching the surface. Astrology hasn't really come into its own yet. I used to get weather advice from an astrologer named Dottie Willis. It lived in Nova Scotia. She did very good weather prediction. She's long since passed away. And then Jeffrey Brock, who lived in the Miami area, who's now has gone on. But, you know, taking what is in common knowledge, you know, like the Church of Light lectures on weather prediction and stuff, and applying the rules in a mechanical sense, they don't work. They just don't. So what I'm saying is that I know that there's stuff out there that hasn't manifested yet. And, you know, hopefully if I don't live to see it, it'll come around the bend in the not too distant future. I have a suspicion that in the future, people will look back on this period and wonder how we ever survived because our hearts were so separated from each other. We were so encrusted with the polarization that you don't support my political candidate or you don't find, my religion adorable or, like any number of things or just um, any of the other things that people fight about. And we haven't found that, what would we say, harmony yet. Well, I'm going to lay something on you now that I think is at the backdrop. When I was putting this talk together, there were so many things I couldn't figure out, well, should I start with this? Should I start with that? But astrology doesn't really have an explicit cosmology laid out where people can grab it. I mean, it does for people like me who have it in our heart, a Hindu soul living in a Western body. But when you look at it, a lot of people talk about reincarnation and karma. Well, if we reincarnate, where did it begin and where did it end? Is it just endlessly, reincarnated? Well, the evolution of the soul takes place over a long period of time. The classical scriptures say that once we achieve the human form, which there's an evolutionary process, and consciousness is when it reaches completion, we take birth in the human form. And then in the human form, we take 8,400,000 lifetimes before we become God realized, which is the unity of the conscious and the unconscious mind. It's the explicit bliss of union, of being at one with everything. So what happens? We have this envelope that keeps developing. We keep taking higher and higher forms until we have the good fortune of getting the tail end of the assembly line and end up in the human form. Well, in the human form, we go from one lifetime to another, and we keep developing. We have our ledger is opening, and we are having, accounts with this person and that person. We get, things that we have to take care of. And, have you ever had somebody come into your life and for no explicit reason, they gave you something and you thought, oh, wow, I didn't have this. And or had somebody come into your life and you just felt, oh, I have to give this person something. And you give it to them and you think, why did I do that? Well, these are open ledgers, the karma unfolding. But in the process of spending karma, we're creating new karma. How in the world do we get out from under it? It is through the grace of the mountain climber, the master who has already tread the path and can pull us along, help us, and allows us to take the shortcuts. So everybody that comes into our life has a role to play, and every action that we put forward in life, there is a reaction. It creates some karma, and as Jesus says, what you do to another, you do to me. And also, you should treat other people as you would like to be treated. Okay, that is to make a moral principle out of the role that karma plays in our life, because what we do does come back to us. And it may not come back to us instantaneously. I mean, I would go to the South every other year with my mom and dad. And, I was the northern cousin. And I'd be there in Kresge's, and my little sister would run up to the drinking fountain that said colored, and she'd hit the button and be disappointed because the water that came out of it was clear. She thought the colored fountain meant that it was going to have colored water coming out of it. But that was because we grew up where the racism wasn't so explicit. But we've come a long way in a very short period of time. And the adventures that we're having now with technology is, let's face it, we know we're on a train wreck. I remember some of my students in my correspondence school said to me, it was about 20 years ago, what can we do to stop, global warming from giving us the worst of what's going to happen? I says, well, it's okay to do all the right things, but let's face it, we're way beyond the tipping point. We're a train wreck. It's going to happen, and you can prepare for it. But preparation does not mean moving to Hawaii and building an underground bunker like Mark Zuckerberg did. It's like or moving up into the mountains in Colorado in a survivalist camp. Yeah, you can do that, but why? If the whole world goes to hell, who wants to be here anyway? Let's advocate for people treating each other correctly. Let's advocate for people loving and sharing, not going into a bunker with a machine gun and to protect your stuff. That is hell. But let's build heaven. Anyway, we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have actions. And the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions, we have send out a vibration onto the planet. And part of being in tune with the cosmos is learning to be in tune with ourselves, which means having cohesion between the things that you think about and what you feel in your heart and what you act out in your everyday life. What good does it do to say, yeah, we're all one, but then to act like I want to hold on to what's mine and everybody else can go to hell? It's like we want the thoughts in our mind to start moving in concert with what we feel in our heart and what we do in our everyday life. And on that note, I would say, start to see the joy that comes from our interactions with others. Wherever your mind goes, that's where your heart will eventually go. So remember, people that come into your life that are expressing Capricorn energy. Capricorn has a brilliant function of establishing a sense of boundaries that gives a demarcation, a sense of selfhood, which is necessary. But Saturn rules division. It separates us. And that separation is necessary. And when a child reaches the age of 7, which is when Saturn makes its first square to its natal position, the ego takes hold. And when the ego takes hold, the child starts becoming responsible for their activity. Before them, karmically, it belongs to the parents. the karma is not on the shoulders of that individual. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, and it rules multiplication. And in the Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer, which is where we learn the socialization within the family structure, which is a Jupiterian operation. You are good because we all share the same blood. Venus, that we meet in other people, rules addition. And when we see qualities in other people that we admire, it's very interesting, I think, that when Saturn reaches its opposition point to its natal position, we go through puberty. And what happens at puberty, Venus ruled, we start recognizing that there's a difference between men and women. There's a biological difference, an emotional difference. We get interested in people for reasons other than just what goes on in their mind. And you'll notice that kids in high school will all dress alike and look alike and want to be part of a group where everybody is homogenized, and that peer group acceptance becomes so important. Well, Venus rules addition. We add other people to our lives, and Mars rules subtraction. And what is Mars is that, it's like that self-assertion. It's like, I'm me, I'm mine, I'm going to do my own thing. And as the astrologer Richard Eidemann used to say, it's like Aries is me here now. And Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, Neptune, that Aries is escaping. Pisces is not me, not here, not now. It's that, the small self disappearing for good or ill. So learning how to identify each one of these planets in people that walk into our life and recognizing, do I want to spend my day watching news programs that make me feel angry? I'm listening to something and I want to get out of my chair and go do something. Well, I remember, and I put this in my book, my girl Juliana came running into my office and screaming, "Dad, come and see this." Well, I went in to watch what she was seeing on television. It was a commercial for Save the Children. And she looked at me, she says, "Do something." Well, she's an Aries. I said, look at this I understand the scenes that you're seeing are terrible, but we do something. We contribute to these organizations and we are involved in eradicating the misery of the world. But my point is here now, we don't want our mind to be so infected by the difficulties of the world that we end up being belligerent or being depressed or just being indifferent to it. How to remain positive. I remember quite clearly, I was with a friend of mine. I was back in the 20s. I was 20, 21, and my friend Michael Schmidt and I were in an argument, and I got him. I knew how to clinch it where he would get angry, and that meant I won. And he stepped back and he looked at me and he says, "Bob, you're one of only two people who knows how to make me angry." I never forgot it because I realized that he changed the dynamic of what we were doing by objectifying it, by standing back from it rather than giving way to the passion of the moment. And I'm saying that that level of detachment is sometimes necessary. I don't want to sit and watch, you know, things on television or read things in magazines or newspapers that just make me angry all the time. Because I write a newsletter and I talk to clients, I have to know what's going on in the world. But I want to see things that remind me that we are all good, that we have something to contribute that's positive. So um, I wanted to tell you as a quick illustration of how we have to encapsulate our time and how we have to put it in perspective. You know, when Buddha was walking on the planet, he was holding a talk where there was lots of people gathered around him. And across the shore was a yogi who was very jealous because a lot of the followers that had gathered around the Buddha were people who used to come and listen to his talks. And so he walked across the water, across the lake on the water, up to Buddha, and Buddha turned to him and says, "Oh, that was a good trick. How did you do that? How long did it take you to learn to walk on the water?" And the yogi says, "It took me 30 years to learn this." And the Buddha says, "You're a fool. It took 30 years of your life to do something that you could have had for a paisa from the ferryman." And again, it's sort of like, okay, where are we putting our attention? What are we going to spend our life doing? And it doesn't behoove us to spend our life doing a bunch of things that we could easily have done a simpler, more efficient way. Now, I'm going to stop here in a minute, but I want to say that nobody's asked any questions here, and I realize I bounced around in this vast topic from thing to thing. I wanted to see if there's something that vital that I overlooked in the things that we discussed tonight. Well, does anybody have any questions or things that they wanted to put forward? You're all.
I kind of have one. It's a little off topic, and if anybody else has something they want to ask. It's not off topic. I've been doing some reading, especially in the Robert Schmidt materials about the early the Greek, their philosophical approach and how they integrated astrology in their cosmology, and the idea that the planets evolved from the Babylonian idea that they were actually deities into the idea that they were messengers of the deities, and that the planets were kind of the middleman, where they kind of were the conduit for talking to the deities, but they weren't actually the deities. So I noticed when you were kind of having the conversation about, and I realized it was somewhat abstract in the idea that the planets were deities. I mean, have you kind of done research on that or studied that evolution of that thought?
No, I'm not. I mean, I have a master's degree in philosophy, and I'd spent 10 years in academia before I launched my astrology practice back in 74, 73. But I will tell you, and again, I've always had a personal relationship with the planets, meaning that if I want to talk to Jupiter, I just talk to Jupiter, just like I would pick up the phone and call Aunt Ruth. But uh, other people have, and again, there is a metaphysical question, an ontological question that I will deal with in a minute, but I'm just going to say at the most practical level, you know, I've always dealt with the planets as 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 real as real entities. And like I'm wearing a blue shirt. Well, blue exists in a number of different places. Um, and there is, you can say, an archetypal blue that stands behind the blue. It's a platonic concept.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say, that the level, there's the deities who are on the platonic level of the ideal, and then there's the messenger of the planets that are actually sentient to and available to the people. So your
Mhm.
conversation is with the messenger. So I mean, I was just trying to, because I've been studying that, I was trying to kind of fit those philosophies in.
And I'm not saying that there's anything that I actually disagree with there. It's just I can say I can, like Aristotle, looking at the Platonic forms, would say the forms exist, but they don't exist unless they're particularly manifest.
Mm.
In other words, the color blue does not exist in the abstract. It only exists if you have a blue item. Um, which I'm a Platonist, and so I think of the Platonic forms exist separate from their manifestation, but I carry it one step further with the planets in the sense that um, I experience the planets as 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 um, as deities in their own right. The sun, when I'm talking to the sun, I know that the physical sun that's at the center of our solar system is a manifestation of the sun, but the sun is not a concept. It's not a mental construction in my mind any more than you are, Julia, are a construction in my mind. The sun exists. It's a real entity. And I also experience the sun as an ego. I see it in the world as sunlight, as an external manifestation and as an internal thing. But what created both of those things was the sun himself. And it's the same with the moon. The, the moon is the environment. The moon is everything in the atmosphere. But the moon is a literal entity, and you can talk to the moon as a manifestation of uh, the Divine Mother. But the moon, as Maya, as creation, um, uh, is a real being. And yes, you can talk to her as the goddess Kali. You can talk to, and which is a face. It, it's just like my mother was Eleanor, but I called her mother. Her friends called her Eleanor, and other people called her different things. I did at times too, but that's another story. The point is that there is a being behind what we can conceive of mentally that creates these things. That's how I understand it. And it's not like I did research. It was like it's it would be like talking to a fish and saying, "Do you know if water exists? Have you done any research on this?" Well, I'm in it, it's all around me. That's that's my reality. And that's it's like saying, okay, you and I are having a conversation. Okay, what is the vehicle for the conversation? It is Mercury. But Mercury, as the messenger of the gods, is a real entity and has a real role to play in creation. And I mean, it is complicated, but it is simple. And
Mhm.
that was why I was showing this triangle between the planet, its internal manifestation, and its external manifestation. It's like they they stand outside of creation, but in it at the same time. Um, so it is. I don't know if I'm even addressing the
Yep.
issue. I know that there's look at there are people who are much, much more profound at understanding the. I mean, and I, I knew the three Roberts. Robert Smith, Robert Hand, and Zolar.
Mhm.
Uh, I was there when Project Hindsight was formed, and I was a subscriber. Got all of the books, and there it's very worthwhile. I was talking with Rob Hand when it first formed, and I said, I can go out. I have clients that are professional fundraisers. I can go out and get donations to get all of this. I know how to tap in and make the rain happen. And he said, if astrologers are not willing to do this themselves, if we can't raise the money out of the astrology community, I don't think we should own it. Of course, Rob is a Sag, so it's like that was his spirit of it, and it happened, and the stuff, the reclamation of these ancient um, records is profound.
Well, the
Wow.
philosophical through line intrigues me because we are the Platonists. I mean, I'm a Platonist, I think. So basically, we're going back to reinterpreting or rephrasing some concepts that are basic in their cosmology, and it fascinates me that what we're really doing is repeating a theme that we probably repeated over and over and in a different conversation, and it's basically the same through line, the Platonic through line.
Julia, I'm 100% with you, and I would say for each of us is finding what's the simplest path that allows us to value and experience and distribute the truth that we come to. I always look for the I don't poo-poo anybody's astrology, but for my own practice, I always look for what is the simplest
Mhm,
way of getting there. Uh, in philosophy, it's called Occam's razor. You
mhm.
don't multiply uh, any abstract concepts beyond what is necessary. Um, for me, it's very simple. It's I find I find great joy in dealing with the deities. And again, I could go, you know, Jupiter, it appears in every culture.
Mhm.
Jupiter is, um, and we are in Jupiter's time period here.
What do you
Jupiter is
mean by that?
Jupiter is Indra in uh, in India, uh, Thor in Nordic mythology, and so on. And in every culture, there is a king of the gods, the ruler on Mount Olympus. But in the in the in in creation, that isn't just a planetary body. And I'm a little further afield here, but Jupiter is actually different than the other planetary beings because most planetary beings went through an evolution that is different than we went through in the human kingdom, except for Jupiter. Jupiter's one of us. And Jupiter isn't just a deity, he is a station that is that people try to unthrone. Every yogi will get to a certain place and attempt to push him out. And with Jupiter's weapons at his disposal, he throws the net of illusion over them and distracts them. It's like, you want God realization? You want to be me? Okay, well, suppose I give you $1 million. Oh, okay, well, that'll be different. I'll do God later. Let me take something material. In other words, Jupiter maintains his position because he buys people off. But after 4 precessions of the equinox, 120, 20 and 26,000 years. After 104,000 years, Jupiter has to give that spot up and incarnate with no special powers in the human kingdom. That's the only the other planetary deities that have a different role. But
Now, when are we date starting that? Is that the year 0? What is the beginning? Because we've only been through one cycle then.
no, uh, the it is it starts with an alignment of the precession of the equinox, and I don't want to give you the wrong information. I'd rather give you no information than bad information. But there is a marker where the vernal equinox and the equator intersect, and where that position hits a certain place in our galaxy. That starts, marks the beginning of a cycle. We are at the end of a cycle, and it is the end of a cycle of cycles. And something magnificent is happening. People talk about, well, there's something big is getting ready to happen. Hey, wake up and smell the roses. It's happening. We live in a world that is different than the world we were born into.
Yep.
I mean, it was so simple. If we were living 200 years ago and somebody asked, well, what profession are you going to do? Oh, it's simple. What does your dad do? Because that'll be what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You're a woman, here's what you do. If you're a guy, here's what you do. And the roles were pretty well laid out. But we've been at a neck break speed. We've been going from one thing to another. I'm just marvel at my daughter, Julie. I know those of you know me know the story because you were there when it happened. Uh, uh, Juliana was in the 4th grade, and I was invited to Dr. Joel Ying, our physician, over for dinner. And she says, oh, what are you and Joel doing after dinner? He says, he's going to show me how to use PowerPoint. And she burst out laughing. He says, Dad, you don't know how to use PowerPoint? She's in public school. She's in the 4th grade. And I says, you know how to use PowerPoint? He says, Dad, we learned that in the 2nd grade. I thought, oh my God.
Wow.
The world is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
We forget, you hold in your hand more computing power than they had when they landed, when the moon module landed. The biggest computers in the world didn't have that much power. And now we take it for granted. we can, I'm getting ready to go to India. For $10, I can pay Spectrum to let me call anybody anywhere in the world while I'm in India for, a billing cycle, basically $10 a month. It's like, what? How much would that have cost 10 years ago or 5 years ago? It's just, it's, it's acceleration that we are blind to how fast we are moving and how rapidly things are progressing. And I'm I can tend to be very impatient. And so I am very forgiving when other people are. But it's helpful to step back and just to recognize things are changing very, very rapidly. So, is there any other questions? I hope I don't even know if I addressed your question, but
Oh, I think, yeah, you did. You think it's a pretty broad question, actually. It's kind of a,
no, but it's seminal, you
yeah.
know, and I don't ha have anything against anybody else's approach to any of this. I just know what works for me and how I work for my clients. I know, and this is again, when I'm having trouble with a client, oh God, now I'm speaking out of church. I never talk this way. Say you and I are in session and you were a client of mine. Everybody, she's not. This I would never identify somebody who is a client in that way because I have Scorpio rising and I believe everybody has a right to privacy on this. And but the point is, if you and I were, in an astrologer client relationship and I was having difficulty, I would maybe, depending on the nature of the difficulty, I would have my Mars talk to your Mars. I would have,
Oh, that would be chaotic. My Mars is in terrible shape.
well, Mars creates karma. If if it wasn't for Mars, we wouldn't have any karma. But Saturn is the end result. That is what we end up. Saturn shows what we have to do in a lifetime. And if we don't do that, we suffer until we do it because we have to. The inexorable law of must. That's what you must do. Um, and that Mars plows the field and plants, and Saturn is what grows. It's the harvest. And when you see somebody going through a brilliant Saturn return or Saturn over their sun or Saturn over their midheaven, and they have great things happening for them, or nothing at all. It's like, oh, okay, that's somebody who's handling their Saturn very well. When people feel, everything's falling in their head, they're not handling their Saturn very well. You know, that's a yeah. But I'm saying this is like, uh, you can you can connect person to person through, two people who are in love. They connect over the Venus um, position. And the Venuses connect with each other because Venus is love. Venus is light. Venus is art, it's symmetry, balance. And okay, so
Is
any,
anybody else? I didn't mean to monopolize your time. Is there anybody else that has some questions or comments? This is very philosophical, which is right up my alley. And but I don't want to hog all the comments. Does anybody else have anything else that they have a question?
I'm I'm yours. Anybody who thinks of something that later that comes up, you're welcome to email me, you know.
One
And
more philosophical. Do you disagree with Kant? It sort of sounded like you did.
Kant was brilliant, but wrong. No, the thing is, the the philosopher Um, yeah, in the Buddhist tradition, T.C. Suzuki said the end of Western philosophy was with Nietzsche. And Nietzsche um, was basically a nihilist. It's
Yeah.
like he unraveled it. And it was like, okay, so, but where does that, that and 25 cents will get you a bad cup of coffee. It doesn't go anywhere. It's only, it traveling up the mountain without heart uh, is dry as dust and ends up being self-defeating, very depressing. You know, Kant had just like Hume had very interesting, in a theoretical sense, concepts, but he missed the mark. For one thing, Kant believes and stated that it was impossible to know the essence of the universe directly. You can only know it inferentially. And he is, of course, that's wrong. When you're God realized, you know everything and you have direct access because you become everything. But that concept wasn't part of the Western tradition. That wasn't that wasn't something that was a building block because it all of it was strained out of it.
Mm.
It was like uh, I got into I'll tell you a quickie. My academic advisor, Ralph Carnes, um, was a metaphysician. He was a magician, but he was a Gemini with Moon and Leo, and he could do it from behind the scenes. He was the Dean of Arts and Sciences. I was his only private student. He could have taught any class. He would only teach, like one class in the philosophy department every year, just because he could and he wanted to. Um, but I got interested in astrology, and I came to him and I was showing him all this research, and I was calculating everybody's chart and reading them. And Ralph looked at me. He came, he sat me down. He went and closed his office door and looked at me and says, Bob, I want you to do exactly what I tell you to do. You will finish your degree, you will get out of here, and then go out into the world and form your own astrology company. You will always feel like an intellectual Uncle Tom if you stay in the university because you thought you were coming here to live the life of the mind, but this is the greatest anti-intellectual establishment on the planet. You know, People here aren't really interested in truth in the way that you are in wisdom. It's it's like, and you will suffer for it. So I'll get you through the master's degree program. I'll get your thesis approved. You'll be out of here and then go do astrology. It's funny because he just turned on a dime. I went from being, and there was great love for me and helped and, all of the things. Um, but, it is true. And again, I think this is important. In 1930, Pluto was discovered. And when Pluto was discovered, it was the final nail in the coffin between the schism between East and West. East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Well, we've been moving since Pluto's discovery into one world culture. It is homogenized. Lama Govinda came to the United States, and Swami Satchidananda, and so many people came here. The beginning of the Vedanta Society, and also and again, I'm very, very good friends with an astrologer in India who he and I were, like in the same family in a number of lifetimes. So we have a camaraderie. But he's a Westerner in an Eastern body. And I know so many women who are male, but they were drafted into the female form because during this, starting back about 75 years ago, women were, incarnating that were strong, that had a masculine instinct, but it was necessary because the female form had been so degraded. It needed to be brought up, and so strong souls were taking the female form. And but they were, those that are like conscious, we would have the conversation that they really didn't want to be in the male form, but they had to be here and doing this. And it's like there's been this cross-pollination of people, and you see it in the literature where the um, uh, the Bhagavad Gita was read by the transcendentalist poet. And the transcendentalist poet started, like bringing the Indian philosophy into Western intellectual history. And then Gandhi was reading the transcendentalist poets and got the inspiration for what became the Gandhian revolution in India. And then you had the Martin Luther King reading Gandhi and going through this transformation and bringing this Indian principle back into the West. So there's been this churning happening very rapidly because everything's speeding up during this time period. And we are, again, this whole idea of being at one with the cosmos, even, just recognizing that what's inside of us is also out there. And it's the same thing. Jupiter exists out there, just like Jupiter exists in you, and Jupiter exists out in the world beyond just the name of a city in Florida. It's like we have all of this stuff going on right now, and with the five outermost planets shifting signs within like a 20-month period of time, it's massive. And in recorded history, I've never, I've talked to other astrologers, I've never seen this happen before, and I can't see through research when it's happened before. And we are in a time where it's like hang on to your seatbelt. I mean, it's people who know me, I'm what you'd call a, a flaming liberal. Politically, I'm an ecumenicalist, religious wise. It's like I believe it's like jambalaya. You put it all in the same pot and it has great flavor. You don't chop down all the trees and plant one type of tree and have a healthy forest. You have to have diversity in order to have strength. And America has the strength because of our diversity. Anyway, it's another thought. But I have elected officials as clients that are stalwarts in the Republican Party, even though I'm, politically way out there on the other side of the equation, but I have a connection with their heart. And I know that we all really want the same thing. And I'm happy to be of service where I can be. And I'm saying this to you because I want you to understand it isn't just that we can talk to the planets, which we can. We can have a dialogue with them. Part of the and again, part of the reason is that in the West we pray, which is talking to God. In the East we meditate, which is listening to God, and being able to listen to the planets becomes really important to be able to. It's like when you develop a health problem, to try to get to the root of what the health problem is about is much more important than like, oh, I have a tremendous headache. Let me take a pill to get rid of it. Okay, I'm in favor of being out of pain, but don't ignore the pain as a symptom of something else. Like see what you can do to get to the root of it. Um, anyway, complicated. And I appreciate your question, and I know that you and I could go on these philosophical topics, which is, of course, the lifeblood. It's so much of the way that I think and read and believe and where my mind goes. But I tell my students, please don't write a book. If you I mean, save the trees. It's like, stop me from having to be bored beyond belief, reading another bad book. I mean, there's lots of bad books besides astrology books, but God bless. They're in if you have something that's important to say, by all means, get it out. And there are some really good astrology books, but most of them aren't. Let's face it. That's right. But I'm 100% in behind the Alexandria project, which is let's save all of the stuff that's out there. I'm working with um, Regulus to try to get a particular book um, reprinted, which was written by a friend of mine who's long since passed away, named Shirley Lyons Myers. It's called Elemental Voids. Totally unique. And she's correct, and she corrects something that is genuinely, like most people just assume, because Dane Ridgar said it, and Markham and Jones said it, and it's all in the literature. But it is not that they're wrong, it's just that they've missed something of vitally important about when you have when you're missing an element out of your chart. Well,
That would be interesting to know because I'm missing an element.
she wrote this book called Elemental Voids, and it went out of print, and she died back in 2013. But I got to tell you something. I looked up on Alexandria Project's website, and you have a copy of it.
Oh, golly. Nice. Somebody has a copy of it and we've cataloged it. We
Well,
probably don't actually have possession of it.
well, if you don't, I have a.
Oh, good to know.
And I borrowed it from one of my students. I bought like 50 copies on a secondary market when they were available, and they long went out of print. And me, I was so occupied with other things. But there's a number of things like this that are really gems that I wrote a book review of mundane astrology. Nick Campion, Bajan, and um, Harvey wrote this book.
Mhm.
It was about 42 years ago now, and it's been out of print for a long time. And I saw it, on sale like for $800, and I wrote a long review for a magazine called Celestial Vibes, and the editor of the magazine flipped out. He loved it. He said, "Oh, you have to send this to Nick Campion." And I did, and Nick Campion loved it so much, he sent it to the publisher, and the publisher says, "We have to reprint this book." So something that's been long out of print is on its way back into print. But it's only when somebody takes an interest.
Mhm.
So many books, like when I first entered the field of astrology, if you were an author and you sold 3,000 copies of your book, that was considered a bestseller.
Mhm.
And it went out of print, and it was sold. And if it wasn't, if it was a really good book, like 9 out of 10 books weren't really good, but the ones that were, they disappear just like the bad ones. And so this, I'm 100% supportive of what the Alexandria iBase project is doing. And I'm remiss that I have tied up with so many other projects. And I only, as an elder, I only have about 3 good hours every day. So I have to make sure that I use them well. But my point is that, you know, what you're doing, this work, Julia, is really important. That this preservation, so that it doesn't depend on an archaeologist 1,000 years from now digging it up and saying, "Oh, look at this idea."
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff. The Hittites had all this astrological text that nobody's translated. Yeah, anyway.
What language is it what the Hittites? Is that a different language than,
Hittite is a different language.
oh,
I know that because in the Ideas and Methods department at the University of Chicago, people had to study Hittite in order and um and I did casual research that there's 80% of the manuscripts have never been translated, and
wow.
a vast majority of them are on astrology. So
Wow.
I dropped that on you. Anyway, I apologize. Everybody's been so patient
Well,
here.
I really
Now,
enjoyed your talk. I'm
while
kind
we
of
while, while we were
philosophy junkie.
anybody wants to ask me anything, you can do it now or by email later on.
Appreciate
What's the author's name again of Elemental Voids?
Oh, Shirley Lyons Myers.
And that's going to be reprinted so we can actually get it. Is that what you just said?
No, he didn't. He
I
said that you have a copy or you have
I have a copy,
access.
and I
It's
saw it on your and I bought all the copies that I could find on the secondary market after the publisher didn't have it anymore. A, New Moon, or was it Full Moon Publisher in Texas, was a small publishing company that went out of business. Um, and they published the book. And then unfortunately, I was so distracted. Shirley died, and I wasn't keeping up with her. And and her children are not so interested in having it. They're afraid of being sued if they let it be reprinted or something. I don't know. People get weird when it involves lawyers and stuff. But anyway, so it's one of those things that I'm hoping comes back into, that we manage to get back into print.
Well, is the copyright expired on it? Because if it has, and we can actually digitize it and put it online in our,
You know, I would just say we could go ahead and do it, but um it takes 75 years for a book to end up in the public domain.
yeah.
And I don't know.
And when it does, people grab them and recopyright them and reprint them. So,
I don't know what can be done here, you know. But I would just wanted you to know it's an example of trying to make it all work out. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
well,
Can I ask one quick question before you go? You mentioned that in the very beginning, there was a quote from the Upanishads that you said you um, publish in your newsletter every 10 years or so.
Oh,
Um, can you say again what that is and maybe what Upanishad it's in or where to find it?
what this is called the story of stuff. And it is, if you Google it, you will find it. It is available on YouTube. Um, every 4 or 5 years, when I first saw it, there was like 100 people had seen it. Now millions of people have seen it. It's a woman named Annie Lennox did this really
Oh, yeah.
like cartoon type of presentation of actually how we get material objects and how consumer products come to market and what happens to them. It's it was like I I sent it to a student of mine that lives in Nebraska, and she loved it, and her husband saw it, and he teaches math or science in a high school, and he liked it so much he gave it all to his students. It's a gem. What was from the Upanishads is a Hindu scripture, the Upanishads, and I I will tell you it again. I'll just recite it. When I was a young man, I wanted to move the mountains, so I studied yoga. But by the time I had the power to move the mountains, I had become God and realized why I put the mountains there in the first place.
Mm.
There have been a number of like children's books that have taken that story from the Upanishads and made like little parables out of them and stuff. Anyhow, any other any other thoughts or comments or things that anybody wanted to say?
How to get your book? Mention
My-
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to see it again?
I want you to say again how to get it.
You can get it from me. I think I had 100 copies that I took for myself and personalized them, autographed each numbered copy for people. I have like 10 of those left. And then the publisher is Regulus, and you can get them directly from them, or you can get it from Amazon. And people get it in France. I have some, people who buy it in France and England, in Ireland, India. I don't know. It, you know, it's like a few copies every week or so sell, like it's not on New York Times bestseller list yet, but it should be. Yeah.
Because it's one of the 10% good ones, huh?
It's definitely, I can say this without any hesitation at all, that it it is one of the best astrology books I've ever read. And I'm not saying that because I wrote it. It's true. It is one of the best astrology books I've had people who are not astrologers call me up and say, I never really understood astrology before, but I read your book and it was so easy to understand. Now, I wouldn't say it was necessarily easy to understand. In 20 years, it had been written and rewritten so many times and had been through so many editors' hands. Leela, my soul sister, is in with us in the talk here tonight. I don't very often, forgive me for talking out of church on this, Leela, but Leela had been bugging me for years to let the book go to print. And I made a promise. I very seldom break a promise, but this is one that I broke. And then because of that, there's shame connected with it, and I remembered it. But I said to Leela, if you read this book and you sign off on it and say it's done, I will stop editing it. And she went through it with me, chapter after chapter, each one, and signed off on the whole book. And I went and had it edited professionally a couple of times after that. It wasn't quite done, but I feel bad because I seldom make a promise. And when I do, I very rarely ever actually break it. But, we're close, and I think Leela forgives me for it. And it's better. And it ended up with a few errors in it, even after all of the editing. Her name got spelled wrong in the acknowledgments, which is sort of like, I remember Leela saying to me, somebody stepped on my hands when I was reaching up to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Which It was always ringing in my ears. That was that actually did happen. But so anyway, that is there. And if you uh if you have any trouble, somebody who's, like, what would you say, savvy, phoned me up out of the blue and says, I'm trying to get a copy of your book and I can't find it on Amazon. Could you sell me a copy? And I says, yes, I can. I would like people to buy it from Amazon because if you buy it from them, you can write a review. And if you like it and write a review, it'll actually be online. But I sold them a copy and then I went immediately and I went right to it on Amazon. So God does weird things. And Mercury wasn't even retrograde when that happened. Anyhow. And Mercury
Did
was retrograde tonight when, Julia was having to put up with all of the stuff of people registering late and oh God. Anyway, anybody else have anything that you wanted to ask or say? I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all. I appreciate it. You take care.
did you
Thank
did you
you
put
so much for taking the time to donate this talk to us and to support AIP. And for everyone else that's joined, we had a fabulous response to this talk, and we've done very well in donations, and we are very grateful for that, for all of you and for you, Bob. Thank you
Thank
very much.
Would you drop me a note and let me know what the protocol is? Because I would like, after it's not restricted anymore, I would like to be able to get a copy of this that I can post on my own
I
YouTube.
will send you the MP4 video in its raw state. And
Uh-huh.
then, because when we post it we will post the video in YouTube on the AIP's website, but it just goes out to donors so that people who paid and didn't come or couldn't come will have a chance to review it. And by the end of the month, it goes down. It's copyright material that belongs to you, and we do not want to leave it out there in the public domain. But you can have the original MP4 and do whatever you want with it.
Oh, goody. And I'll be calling you up to find out what to do with it. Become
Julia,
That's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
is his contact information on the email or something? He had said if you have questions, you can email, or to get the book, is his contact information on the email?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
BOBMULLIGA at AOL.com. And I have a website, theastrologycompany.com. So,
Do
and
you
if
still have a lot of active students in your correspondence course? I looked at that. I looked at your course syllabus. It's very extensive.
I don't take on new students right now. I've been to a couple. I'm taking on about one every 2 years, or no, actually, well, about one a month or something. But I have a rule that I don't take on a student unless I can actually spend personal time with them. Um, uh, I feel very bad about that. I don't like people taking it and then not, like stumbling. If somebody says, look, I'm not interested in being a professional astrologer, I want to do your first year, that's fine. Okay. But if somebody has a long range picture that they want to do this as their life's work, you're going to start right at the beginning and I'm going to carry you through it step by step. But if it's 3 a.m. and you have a question for your core, like you're working on something, you call me. You have my cell phone. I'll be with you and I'll help you with it. That's my commitment. I have to do that. It's my dharma. Anyway, if anybody can't get a hold of me, call Julia. She'll know how to get a hold of me.
Well, I'm used to it. Go ahead and holler at me. I will redirect.
You all take care. You have a good evening.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.